In my last video, I went over the history and evolution of one of my old OCs. At the end of that, I said that I might eventually do more videos where I dig out and redesign some old characters of mine. Then after posting that, I realized Art Fight was just around the corner, so we're doing it now! For those who don't know what Art Fight is, there's like a million tutorials and beginner's guides on YouTube. But in short, it's a yearly art gifting game that takes place every July where people draw each other's OCs. I've participated for the last 4 years and it's a lot of fun for artists of any skill level. Just stay away from TikTok. Oh yeah, you should probably watch that other video first if you haven't already. Otherwise you're gonna be missing some context on these characters. First up is Dimetrobot, which is the name of the time-traveling cyborg Dimetrodon I mentioned in the Xenos video. He started as just a random thing I doodled one day back in high school and his first iteration was pretty rough. A while ago I redrew him, which was the sketch I showed last time. As you can see, I drastically reduced the ridiculous amount of scars he had. I'm gonna be using that sketch as the base for the full drawing. Luckily I still have the time-lapse for it, though it's very low quality. Sorry about that. Now Dimetrobot originally didn't have any lore. Like I said, he was just a cool thing I doodled. But then I randomly attached him to Xenos' adventure in Siberia and now he needed a backstory. So I made him a time-traveling paradox. Something that shouldn't exist but somehow does. Which is kind of a cop-out, cause it just means his backstory is that he doesn't have one. At one point I even had it so he was literally stuck in a time loop. Also he does have human level intelligence and can talk. I should probably mention that. After the Tunguska event, Xenos went to space and left Dimetrobot behind, where he was then found by an expedition and some decades later became involved in my superhero setting. I'll have to make a dedicated video about my old superhero setting at some point. As part of this drawing I also finally drew his right side. I'm not entirely satisfied with how it turned out though. The left side definitely looks way more interesting, but it's good to have at least some kind of reference for the other side as well. And that's Dimetrobot. Since I already had that sketch done, his redesign isn't that drastic, but it's nice to finally have a fully rendered image of him. Next is Aliki, the demon girl that Ivan had to escort. So Aliki's initial concept literally came to me in a dream. Mind you, that dream was like over a decade ago, so I barely remember it. But there was a guy who summoned a demon, then they fused I guess, and the result was a girl or something like that. Translating this into an actual story, here's what I came up with. Aliki was a demon who wanted to be human, so she made a deal with a wizard who would cast a spell to swap their species. Aliki turned into a human girl but retained some demon powers, while the wizard turned into some sort of demon hybrid monster. This was way too convoluted though, so eventually I simplified it into Aliki just being half demon, born of a human mother and a demonic father. The exact identity of the latter has changed over time, but eventually I settled on the following. When the world ended, a desperate man made a deal with Asmodai, the Demon King. His family would survive the apocalypse, but in return his daughter would go on to bear Asmodai's child. That child is Aliki. Aliki grew up in a bunker with her mother and her grandparents. While she looks mostly human, she does have glowing red eyes and crow-like talons instead of feet. To hide the latter, she usually wears oversized boots. That said, she does also have a full demon form, which I'll get to later. She never really learned how to control switching between forms, so instead her demon form is being suppressed by the necklace she wears, which bears the Elder sign. Eventually, despite Asmodai's protection, Aliki's family mysteriously dies. All alone now, Aliki takes her grandfather's rifle and her mother's Game Boy and leaves the bunker to explore the post-apocalypse. The tentative name for her story was A Girl and Her Game Boy, a nod to A Boy and His Dog. Obviously I could never actually get away with that title, cause Nintendo would come after me. Now Aliki was meant to be 15, but her old pixel art never reflected that. She just looked like an adult. So for this design I tried to make her look younger, except I accidentally went too far and now she looks like 10. I like how she turned out though, so maybe I'll change her age? Not sure. She kinda reminds me of Nayuta from Chainsaw Man, but seeing her with the rifle also gives me Girls Last Tour vibes. Speaking of the rifle, Aliki claims that she has never missed a shot, which is true in the sense that she has never actually fired the rifle. It's also broken and out of ammo, so yeah, she's just bluffing really hard. As for her demon form, it has also gone through various iterations. At some point she was literally the Jersey Devil. Don't ask me how that was meant to fit into the lore lore, but eventually I settled on her just turning into a shadow demon. This is also tied to the fact that the demons of this setting just looked like night gaunt's from the Cthulhu mythos. I initially wanted her wings to look like whipped cloth, but that didn't look good, so instead I made them essentially just shadows which she drags behind her, and they turned out looking really nice. Despite looking a bit too young, I really like how Aliki turned out. It's certainly a more evocative design than her old pixel art. You can actually tell that she's meant to be a demon child now. Moving on to Aslog the Armless, who probably needed a redesign the most, considering her old sprite literally just looks like Aliki. True to her name, Aslog has no arms. She lost them as a child during some disaster. At one point that disaster was 9/11 for some reason, but later it was the collateral of Ivan fighting Zaar, the thunder god. Losing both arms was obviously pretty rough on her childhood, but eventually she began having dreams of the Mothman, who recruited her as a witch of fate. This brings her into the story, as Mothman orders her to find Aliki. To what end? Who knows? Over the course of the story, she would become a mother figure to Aliki and act as a foil to Ivan. As for her redesign, I wanted to keep her cloak, but I didn't like how he would kinda hide her lack of arms. Also, and this is kinda dumb, but I accidentally drew her chest like way too big. Oh well. With that, the main trio of a girl and her Game Boy all got their redesign. Gotta say, seeing them all like this kinda makes me want to revisit their story. Maybe one day. But there's still one important character missing, the aforementioned Mothman. So I kinda had a Mothman obsession back in the day, which of course led to him becoming a major character in my mythology. He went through a couple designs before landing on his current look, which is also where he got his name and lore. Zaar, the Raven God of Fate and Secrets. I actually drew him years ago in this amazing illustration, and honestly, his design is solid as is, so I'll keep it that way. Zaar was part of the Watchers, a group of angels who swore to watch over humanity, only to break that vow and subjugate them instead. When they eventually got punished for that, Zaar was able to weasel his way out of punishment by pointing out that unlike the other angels, he had never sworn loyalty to God. In return for his cunning, heaven gave him the ability to see past, present and future. Whether this was meant as a punishment or reward is unclear. He then retreated into the realm of dreams to watch fate spin its web. He also began tricking young women into serving him as witches, usually ones that are social outcasts cause they are easier to convince. So that's pretty gross, but he is a fallen angel, so you can't expect him to be a good guy. So far I've only redesigned old OCs that weren't on Artfight yet. This last one is a character that already was on the site but needed an overhaul. Back in the day I had an electro swing phase, where I would listen to these random compilations on YouTube. You sadly can't do that anymore because it's infested with AI garbage. One of these compilations had this image, and the character design just kinda stuck with me. So I did what any artist does, steal it to use as a base for an OC. And so I made this sprite and called her Lady Osiris. A couple years later, after getting a tablet, I decided to update her. That was when I still experimented with how to get human proportions right, and the result was this. I really liked it at the time, but as my style evolved, it hasn't aged the best. The same goes for this old reference sheet I drew for my second art fight. I've been meaning to redo that, but I also grew dissatisfied with her outfit. It just feels like a little too much, but I wasn't really sure how to fix it. That was until I had an epiphany. This girl belongs in a suit. So, who is Lady Osiris? Osiris is part of the Sons of Chaos, a group of eldritch outer gods that exist throughout my various settings. Most of them look like what you'd expect, nightmare tentacle monsters that will break your mind. Osiris, however, took on human form and began interacting with the mortal plane. The result is that she became addicted to gambling and fell in love with the female form. So she became a gambling womanizer. The gambling bit also extends to her name, which is taken from the stand of Daniel J. Darby from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. A dumb thing I included in her original backstory is that she actually learned how to gamble from Darby, which is why she named herself after his stand. Of course I can't actually make that canon, but it's a fun reference to think about. Anyway, using her newly acquired skills, Osiris built her own interdimensional casino called the Duat, as in the Egyptian afterlife, where she can gamble all day while being surrounded by her harem of beautiful women. If you win against her, she will use her godlike powers to grant you a wish. If you lose, however, your body, mind and soul belong to her now. As I said, the main idea for this redesign was to put her in a suit. The two main inspirations for this more androgynous look were Rika from Pokémon and Arlecchino from Genshin Impact. Some other changes were to tweak her hair a bit, because I was never really happy with how messy it looked. The flower in her hair was changed from a nondescript black flower to specifically a black lily, because Yuri is Japanese for lily. And since her new hairstyle made one of her ears visible, I gave her an earring shaped like the Ankh to tie in some Egyptian iconography. While part of me will miss her old outfit, I really love this new look. It's just so much better and way more fitting for a womanizing casino owner. And that's all the redesigns for this time. All of these can be found on my Artfight profile, so if you're participating and want to draw them, the link is in the description. I also have both Ivan and Xenos on there, as well as my Pokémon Gijinkas and a bunch of other OCs. I hope you enjoyed this and I'll see you next time. Bye!